I remember the exact shade of the sky when I pulled into my driveway that afternoon. It was that washed out pale blue you only get in early fall, when the heat hasn't fully let go, but the air carries just enough bite to make you roll the windows up halfway. I had both hands tight on the steering wheel, knuckles pale, my mind still spinning from what the doctor had just told me. It wasn't supposed to be a big appointment, just a follow-up, something routine, something boring. That's what I kept telling myself all week, brushing off the tight feeling in my chest every time I thought about it. But sitting there in that sterile office, hearing the words come out of his mouth, I felt like the ground tilted under me, like something inside my life had quietly shifted out of place, and nothing was going to sit right again. I didn't even turn the radio on during the drive home, just silence, except for the low hum of the engine and the occasional rush of a passing car. I remember stopping at a red light about 2 blocks from my house and realizing I had no memory of the last 5 minutes, like I'd been driving on autopilot while my brain tried to catch up with reality. When I finally turned onto my street, everything looked painfully normal. Same row of trimmed lawns, same mailboxes, same cracked sidewalk I'd meant to fix for years. Mrs. Donnelly across the street was watering her plants like she always did around that time, her little yappy dog circling her ankles. It all felt so unchanged, like the world didn't get the memo that something in mine had just fractured. I pulled into my driveway, cut the engine, and just sat there for a second. My hands were still on the wheel, but they'd gone slack. I stared straight ahead at the front of my house, the house I'd lived in for almost 2 decades, the house I shared with my wife, Lauren. Lauren. Even thinking her name felt strange in that moment, like I was saying it from a distance. I finally let out a slow breath and reached for the door handle, but before I even stepped out, something caught my eye on the windshield, a piece of paper tucked under the wiper blade. At first, I figured it was a flyer. We got those sometimes, landscaping services, church events, political stuff. But this wasn't printed. It was folded, like someone had taken the time to place it there deliberately. I stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching under my shoes, and pulled the paper free. It was just a single sheet, creased once down the middle. My name wasn't on it, nothing fancy, just handwriting. I unfolded it, and that's when my stomach dropped. Don't go inside. That was it. No signature, no explanation, just those 3 words. For a second, I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. It felt like a prank, like something a teenager would do out of boredom. I even glanced up and down the street, half expecting to see someone watching, waiting for my reaction. But the street was quiet. Mrs. Donnelly had already gone inside. Her dog wasn't barking anymore. There was no one around. That's when a weird, cold feeling started creeping up my spine. I looked back at the note, studying the handwriting. It wasn't messy. It wasn't rushed. It was deliberate, careful, almost too careful, like whoever wrote it wanted to make sure it was legible. And then I noticed something else. I knew that handwriting.
It wasn't more like a slow recognition, something tugging at the back of my mind. I'd seen it before, on birthday cards, on sticky notes, on those little thank you messages people leave after borrowing something. It belonged to my neighbor, Greg. Greg had lived next door for as long as we had, 18 years. We moved in within a month of each other, back when the houses were still new and the trees were barely taller than the fences. We'd shared beers over the years, helped each other with yard work, watched each other's houses during vacations. He'd been at our 4th of July barbecues. He'd brought over tools when I needed them. Hell, he was the one who helped me install the deck in our backyard. Greg wasn't the kind of guy who left cryptic notes. I looked over at his house. His truck was in the driveway. Lights were off, at least from what I could see through the front windows. Everything looked normal over there, too. So why would he write something like this? And more importantly, why would he put it on my car instead of just knocking on my door? A thought crossed my mind then, sharp and sudden. Lauren. I turned back toward my house, my eyes scanning the front windows. Curtains were drawn halfway, just like they usually were during the day. Nothing looked out of place. No broken glass, no obvious signs of anything wrong. I pulled my phone out and checked the time. Lauren should have been home. She worked from home most days, and she hadn't mentioned going anywhere. We texted briefly that morning. Normal stuff. Grocery list, dinner plans, nothing unusual. My thumb hovered over her contact. I considered calling her, asking what was going on. But something stopped me. The note. Don't go inside. It wasn't just a warning. It felt urgent, like whoever wrote it didn't have time to explain. I looked back at Greg's house again, debating whether to walk over there. But before I could move, the front door of my house opened, and Lauren stepped out. The moment I saw her, something felt off. It wasn't anything obvious at first. She looked like herself. Same shoulder-length blonde hair pulled back loosely, same gray sweater she wore when she was working from home. But her face was pale, not just tired or stressed, pale in a way that made my chest tighten. She froze when she saw me standing there by the car. For a second, neither of us said anything. We just stared at each other across the driveway. Then her eyes flicked down to the paper in my hand, and I swear I saw fear flash across her face. Not confusion, not curiosity. Fear. "What's that?" she asked, her voice too quick, too sharp. I held the note up slightly. "This?" "Yeah," she said, stepping forward, but not too close. "What is it?" I studied her for a moment before answering. "Someone left it on my car." Her jaw tightened, just for a second. "Okay, and?" I unfolded it slowly, keeping my eyes on her as I did. "It says, 'Don't go inside.'" There was a pause, a long one, and in that pause, everything changed. Because instead of laughing it off, instead of rolling her eyes or making a joke about weird neighbors, she just stood there, completely still. Her lips parted slightly, like she was about to say something, but nothing came out. "Lauren," I said, my voice lower now. "What the hell is going on?" She shook her head quickly, too quickly. "Nothing. I don't know what that is. It's probably just Greg wrote it." The words landed between us like a dropped glass.
Her reaction was instant. She looked away. And that's when the cold feeling in my chest turned into something heavier, something darker, because people don't look away like that unless they're hiding something. "Why would Greg leave me a note telling me not to go into my own house?" I asked. "I don't know," she said, but her voice had changed. It was thinner now, less certain. "Lauren," she crossed her arms like she was trying to hold herself together. "I said I don't know." I took a step toward her. "Then why do you look like you're about to pass out?" "I'm not," she snapped, a little too defensively. We stood there in the driveway, the distance between us suddenly feeling enormous. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Something was wrong. Not just small wrong, not "we'll laugh about this later" wrong. Something real, something serious. And whatever it was, she knew. I looked past her, toward the open front door. From where I stood, I could only see a sliver of the hallway. Nothing unusual, nothing that explained the tension hanging in the air like a storm about to break. I looked back at her. "Move," I said. Her eyes widened slightly. "What?" "Move," I repeated, firmer this time. "I'm going inside." She didn't move. "Lauren." "Please don't," she said, and this time there was no hiding it. Her voice cracked. And right there, in that moment, with the note still in my hand and my wife standing between me and my own front door, I realized something I couldn't unthink. Whatever was inside that house, it wasn't just bad. It was something she didn't want me to see. For a second, I just stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the one I thought I knew. 18 years together, marriage, holidays, routines so familiar they felt automatic, and suddenly she looked like a stranger standing in my driveway, physically blocking me from my own house. "Lauren," I said again, quieter this time, but heavier. "Move." Her eyes were glassy now, like she was holding something back that was right on the edge of spilling over. "Please," she whispered. "Just give me a minute." "A minute for what?" She didn't answer. Her lips pressed together and she shook her head again, like she was trying to deny something even to herself. That was it for me. I stepped forward, closing the gap between us. "I just got back from the doctor," I said, my voice tightening. "I've had a hell of a day, and now I come home to a warning on my car and my wife acting like this? So no more vague answers. Move." Something in my tone must have hit her, because she flinched, actually flinched. And then, slowly, reluctantly, she stepped to the side. Not much, just enough to clear the doorway. But she didn't look at me when she did it. That bothered me more than anything else. I walked past her, my shoulder brushing hers lightly, and stepped inside. The house felt wrong. I don't know how else to explain it. Nothing was obviously out of place at first glance. The entryway looked the same. Shoes by the door, keys in the bowl. The faint smell of the vanilla candle Lauren liked to burn during the day still lingered in the air. But underneath that, there was something else. A tension, like the house itself was holding its breath. I stood there for a moment, listening. No TV, no music, no movement, just silence. "Hello?" I called out, even though I didn't know why. Behind me, I could hear Lauren step inside too. The door clicked shut, louder than usual.
"Who's here?" I asked, turning halfway toward her. "No one," she said quickly. Too quickly. I turned back toward the hallway, my eyes scanning every detail now. That's when I noticed it. A shoe. Not just any shoe, a man's shoe. It was sitting just off to the side near the hallway wall, like it had been kicked off in a hurry. Dark brown leather. Definitely not mine. Not Greg's either. I knew his style, and this wasn't it. My chest tightened. I pointed at it without taking my eyes off it. "Whose is that?" Lauren didn't answer. I slowly turned to look at her. She looked like she might collapse. "Lauren," I said, each syllable sharp now. "Whose shoe is that?" I can explain, that's not an answer. She wrapped her arms around herself, her fingers digging into her sleeves. "Please don't get mad." A short, disbelieving laugh escaped me. "Don't get mad?" I took a step toward the shoe, then another, my heart starting to pound harder with each movement. There was a ringing in my ears now, like my body was trying to warn me to stop, to not go any further, but I couldn't, not anymore. I reached down and picked it up. It was still warm. That hit me like a punch. Whoever it belonged to, they hadn't been gone long. I dropped the shoe like it burned me and turned fully toward Lauren. "He's here," I said. It wasn't a question. Her silence confirmed it. "Where is he?" My voice had dropped into something low and dangerous, even to my own ears. She shook her head, tears starting to spill now. "Please, don't do this." "Where is he?" "In the—" She stopped herself, clamping a hand over her mouth. But it was too late. I already knew. The bedroom. Of course. Where else would he be? Everything inside me surged at once. Anger, disbelief, something close to nausea. My hands curled into fists without me even realizing it. I moved past her before she could say anything else, heading straight down the hallway. "Stop!" she cried, grabbing for my arm, but I pulled away easily. "Don't," I warned, not even looking at her. Each step felt heavier than the last. The hallway seemed longer than I remembered, like it was stretching out just to give me more time to think, to imagine what I was about to see. I reached the bedroom door. It was closed. That alone said everything. We almost never closed it during the day. I stood there for half a second, my hand hovering over the handle. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard it almost hurt. Behind me, I could hear Lauren sobbing quietly. "Please don't open it," she said, her voice breaking completely now. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Then I turned the handle. The door swung open, and everything fell apart. There he was, standing right in the middle of our bedroom, half-dressed, frozen like a deer caught in headlights. I didn't recognize him immediately, but I didn't need to. The context filled in all the blanks. His shirt was unbuttoned, hanging loose. His hair was messy, like he'd just run his hands through it in a panic. And behind him, our bed. Sheets twisted, pillows out of place. Lauren's side of the bed unmistakable. For a second, no one moved. No one spoke. The world just stopped. Then the guy raised his hand slightly, like that was somehow going to help. "Hey, man." I didn't let him finish. I crossed the room in 2 strides and shoved him hard in the chest. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the edge of the bed. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" I shouted, my voice exploding out of me before I could control it. "I can explain," he started, but his voice was shaky. "Yeah?" I shot back. "I'd love to hear this." Behind me, Lauren had reached the doorway. "Stop," she cried. "Please, just stop. Stay out of this." I snapped, not even turning around. The guy straightened up, trying to regain some composure, but it wasn't working. He looked terrified. "Good. I didn't know you were coming home," he said. That sentence hit me harder than anything else. Not, "This isn't what it looks like." Not, "We made a mistake." Just logistics, timing. Like the only problem here was that I'd shown up too early. I let out a slow, disbelieving breath. "So that makes it okay?" "No, I didn't mean, who are you?" I cut in. He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "You don't even have the guts to say your name?"
I said. Ethan, he finally muttered. Ethan. The name meant nothing to me, which somehow made it worse. I glanced back at Lauren, who looked like she was barely holding herself together. Ethan, I repeated. How long? She shook her head immediately. It's not how long, I demanded, louder this time. A few months, Ethan said quietly. Lauren let out a broken sound behind me, like she'd been hoping to hide that. A few months. I laughed again, but there was no humor in it. A few months? I echoed. In my house? It didn't start like this, Lauren tried. Oh, I'm sure it didn't, I shot back. It just magically ended up here, right? In our bed? Silence. Thick. Suffocating. And then, like a flicker of clarity cutting through the chaos, something clicked in my head. The note. I turned toward Lauren slowly. Greg knows. Her face went completely blank. That was answer enough. I looked back at Ethan. You better get dressed, I said, my voice suddenly calm in a way that didn't match the storm inside me. And you better get out of my house before I decide to do something we'll both regret. He didn't argue. Didn't say another word. Just scrambled to grab his clothes, his movements clumsy and rushed. I stepped back, giving him space, but my eyes never left him. When he finally pushed past me and headed down the hallway, I followed just far enough to make sure he actually left. I watched him pull on his shirt as he went. One shoe on, the other still missing. The one I'd found. He didn't look back when he opened the front door. Didn't say anything. Just left. The door slammed shut behind him. And just like that, it was quiet again. Too quiet. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door, my chest rising and falling heavily. Then I turned around. Lauren was still in the hallway, tears streaming down her face, her whole body shaking. For a second, I just looked at her. Really looked at her. And I realized something that felt almost as devastating as what I'd just walked in on. I didn't recognize her anymore. Why? I asked. My voice low, almost hollow. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. And in that silence, standing in the house that suddenly didn't feel like home, I realized this wasn't even the worst part. Because Greg had known. Which meant this hadn't been a secret. Not really. I kept staring at her, waiting for something. An explanation. An excuse. Even a lie that at least sounded like it took effort. But Lauren just stood there, shaking, her eyes red, her breathing uneven like she'd run a mile. Say something, I said.
I don't know where to start, she whispered. That almost made me laugh again, but this time nothing came out. Try the beginning, that usually works. She wiped at her face with the sleeve of her sweater, but it didn't help. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. There it is, I muttered, nodding slowly. That line, that's always the one, right? I mean it, she said, her voice cracking again. It just happened. No, I snapped, sharper than I intended. It didn't just happen. You don't accidentally end up with another guy in our bed in the middle of the day. That takes planning. That takes choices. She flinched again, like every word physically hit her. Was this the first time in the house? I asked. She hesitated. That hesitation was enough. I looked away, running a hand over my face. My skin felt hot, like I had a fever. Unbelievable, I murmured. It wasn't always here, she said quickly, like she was trying to salvage something. At first, it was just coffee, talking, meeting out. Stop, I cut her off, holding up a hand. I don't need the play-by-play. Silence dropped between us again, heavy and suffocating. I leaned against the wall for a second, trying to steady myself. My thoughts were racing, tripping over each other, none of them fully forming before the next one hit. The doctor, the note, Greg, Ethan. It all felt tangled together in this mess I couldn't separate. And then one piece pushed its way forward. Greg, I said, straightening up. How long has he known? Lauren closed her eyes for a second, like she'd been dreading that question more than anything else. A while, she admitted quietly. A while,
I repeated, my jaw tightening. Define a while. A few weeks? I stared at her. So for weeks, my neighbor, my friend, has known my wife's been cheating on me, and I'm just the last one to find out? She shook her head quickly. He didn't want to get involved. He got involved enough to leave me a warning on my car. Her lips pressed together, and she didn't respond. I pushed off the wall and started pacing the hallway, back and forth, like if I stood still too long I might explode. Did he catch you? Is that what happened? Yes, she said softly. Doing what? She didn't answer. I stopped pacing and looked at her again. Doing what, Lauren? Her voice dropped to almost nothing. Kissing in the driveway a few weeks ago. I let out a slow breath through my nose. In the driveway, I repeated. Jesus. It was stupid, she said quickly. We thought no one was around. Yeah, I cut in. Clearly. Another silence. Then something else clicked, something that made my stomach twist even harder. Wait, I said, narrowing my eyes slightly. If Greg knew for weeks, why now? Why leave the note today? Lauren's expression shifted, just slightly. And I got it. That hesitation again. That tiny flicker of something she didn't want to say. What? I pressed. What aren't you telling me? It's nothing. Lauren. She shook her head, but I stepped closer, closing the distance between us again. No, we're way past nothing. You don't get to hold back now. Her breathing picked up again, panic creeping back into her expression. I didn't want you to find out like this. Find out what? She looked down at the floor, like if she avoided my eyes, it wouldn't be real. Lauren? Her voice was barely audible. Greg didn't just randomly decide to tell you. My chest tightened. Then why did he?
She swallowed hard. Because he told me he was going to. Everything seemed to slow down. You knew? I said. She nodded, just slightly. You knew he was going to tell me, and you still had him here. I gestured toward the bedroom, anger surging back up. Today? Of all days? It wasn't supposed to happen today, she said quickly. He showed up and we were talking and then you figured what, might as well? I shot back. Tears spilled over again, but I didn't feel anything from it now. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her, just distance. How long were you planning to let this go on? I asked. I was going to tell you, she said. When? She didn't answer. Next week? Next month? After another few months? I shook my head. Or were you just waiting until you got caught? I wasn't waiting, she insisted weakly. Then what were you doing? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out again. And that was the answer. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders dropping slightly as something inside me shifted. The anger was still there, but underneath it, something else was starting to take over. Clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. I need to talk to Greg, I said. Her head snapped up. No. Yes, I said firmly. Yeah, I do. He's already said too much. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Too much? He's the only one who said anything at all. He didn't have the right. No, I cut in, my voice hardening again. You didn't have the right. That shut her up. I didn't wait for another response. I grabbed my keys off the small table by the door and headed for the front. Where are you going? She asked, panic creeping back in. Next door, I said without turning around. Please don't do this, she said, following a few steps behind me. You're just going to make it worse. Worse than this? I stopped at the door and looked back at her. I'd love to hear how that's possible. She didn't have an answer. Of course she didn't. I opened the door and stepped outside again, the late afternoon air hitting me like a splash of cold water. For a second, I just stood there on the porch, trying to steady myself. Then I walked down the steps and across the small strip of grass that separated our house from Greg's. 18 years. 18 years of being neighbors, of trusting each other, of thinking I knew the people around me. I reached his front door and knocked. Once. Twice. There was movement inside almost immediately, like he'd been waiting. The door opened slowly, and there he was. Greg looked tense. Not surprised, not confused, just tense. Like he knew exactly why I was standing there. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he sighed, running a hand over the back of his neck. I was wondering when you'd come over. That sentence alone told me everything I needed to know about how long this had been sitting with him. You wrote the note, I said. He nodded. Yeah. Why not just tell me to my face? He glanced past me for a second, toward my house, then back at me. I tried, he said, a couple times. When? Last week, couple days ago. You were either not home or it didn't feel like the right moment. I let out a slow breath. So you went with a cryptic warning on my car. His jaw tightened slightly. I saw him go in earlier. Figured you might come home soon. I didn't have time to do it any other way. I studied his face, looking for anything. Hesitation, guilt, something that didn't add up.
But all I saw was discomfort, and maybe a little bit of regret. "You've known for weeks," I said. "Yeah. And you didn't think to tell me?" "I didn't want to blow up your life," he said quietly. I laughed, shaking my head. "That's funny." "I mean it," he added quickly. "I kept hoping she'd tell you herself." "She didn't." "I know." We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of everything hanging between us. Then I asked the question that had been building in the back of my mind since I read that note. "How bad is it?" Greg didn't answer right away, and that pause hit harder than anything else he could have said. My stomach dropped. "Greg," I said, my voice lower now, "how bad is it?" He looked me straight in the eye, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked uncomfortable in a way I'd never seen before. "There's more," he said. Those two words landed like a punch to the chest. More. Not just the cheating. Something else. Something worse. And suddenly, the doctor's appointment, the note, Lauren's panic, it all felt connected in a way I didn't fully understand yet. "What do you mean, more?" I asked. Greg hesitated again. Then he said, "You should probably sit down." I didn't sit. I just stood there on Greg's porch, staring at him, waiting for him to say it, whatever it was. Because at that point, I already felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I couldn't imagine what else could possibly make it worse. "Just say it," I told him. Greg shifted his weight, glancing past me again toward my house, like he was hoping this whole situation might somehow disappear if he didn't look at it directly. Then he looked back at me, jaw tight. "Man, I don't know how to say this in a way that doesn't make it worse." "It's already worse," I said flatly. "You might as well be direct." He let out a breath through his nose, like he was bracing himself. "Okay," he said. "The guy, Ethan, he's not just some random guy she met." Something in my chest tightened again. "Then who is he?" Greg hesitated for half a second too long. "You know him," he said. That didn't make sense. My brain rejected it immediately. "No, I don't." "Yeah," Greg said quietly. "You do." I shook my head, already feeling that disorienting tilt again, like the ground under me wasn't stable. No, I would know if I knew the guy sleeping with my wife." Greg didn't argue. He just watched me, that same uncomfortable look on his face. "Just say his last name," I snapped. "Go ahead, let's hear it." Greg swallowed. "Carter." The name hit me like a delayed explosion. For a second, it didn't fully register. It just floated there, disconnected. Then it clicked. Carter. Ethan Carter. My mind flipped through faces, through years, through memories, until it landed on one. And when it did, everything inside me went cold. "No," I said immediately. "No, that's not—" "It is," Greg said. Not unkindly, just firmly. I shook my head harder, like I could physically shake the thought out of my brain. That's not possible. But it was, because there was only one Ethan Carter I knew, and I knew him well. Too well. "He worked with you," Greg said quietly, "at the firm, a couple years back." My stomach dropped straight through the floor. I saw it now, clear as day. Ethan, younger than me by maybe 8, 9 years. Smart, ambitious, the kind of guy everyone liked without trying too hard. We'd worked late nights together on cases.
Grabbed drinks after work with the rest of the team. I stopped that thought before it could finish, but it was already there. "You brought him here," Greg added, like he was filling in the gaps I didn't want filled. "A few times. Barbecues, 4th of July, stuff like that." I felt like I was going to be sick. Images started stacking on top of each other in my head. Ethan standing in my backyard, beer in hand, laughing at something I said. Lauren next to him, smiling. The three of us sitting around the fire pit one night, talking about nothing important.
I had introduced them. I had opened the door. I actually took a step back, like the memory itself had physical weight. "No," I said again, quieter now. "No, that doesn't make any sense. That was years ago. He moved. He left the firm." Greg nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's what I thought too." A beat. "He moved back," Greg said. "Of course he did. Of course." "About 4 months ago," Greg continued. "I didn't know at first. I just saw him around the neighborhood a couple times. Didn't think much of it until—" He trailed off. "Until you saw them," I finished. He nodded. I ran both hands over my face, dragging them down slowly like I was trying to wake myself up from something. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice hollow. "The guy sleeping with my wife is someone I used to mentor, someone I brought into my home." Greg didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I laughed, but it came out wrong. Broken. That's incredible." "Man, I'm sorry," Greg said quietly. I dropped my hands and looked at him again. "Don't," I said. "Don't do that. You didn't do this. I should have told you sooner." "Yeah," I said, nodding once. "Yeah, you probably should have." He accepted that without arguing. Another silence settled in, heavier than before. But there was still something hanging there, something unresolved. I could feel it. "That's not all," I said. Greg's expression shifted slightly. There it was. "That's not what you meant by more," I continued, my voice tightening again. "So what else is there?" He exhaled slowly, like he'd been hoping I wouldn't push that part. "Greg." He looked down at the porch for a second, then back up at me. "Did you actually go to the doctor today?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. "Yeah, of course I did. Why? What was the appointment for?" I stared at him. "Why does that matter?" "Just answer me." I hesitated. Then I said it. "Fertility," I replied. "We've been trying for a while. No luck. So yeah, follow-up tests." Greg closed his eyes briefly, like that confirmed something he didn't want confirmed. And suddenly, that tight, suffocating feeling came rushing back into my chest. "What?" I asked, my voice sharpening. "What is it?" He didn't answer right away. "Greg." He looked at me again, and there was something in his eyes now that hadn't been there before. Pity. I hated that. "Lauren told me a couple weeks ago," he said carefully. "Told you what?" He hesitated one last time. Then he said it. "She's pregnant." Everything stopped. Not slowed down, not blurred. Just stopped. The world went completely silent, like someone had cut the sound out of reality. I stared at him, waiting for my brain to reject it the same way it had rejected everything else. It didn't. "She's... what?" I said, barely hearing my own voice. "Pregnant," Greg repeated. A sharp, hollow laugh escaped me, but it didn't feel like it came from me.
That's not possible. Except it was, because of what the doctor had said, because of the words that had been echoing in my head the entire drive home. Low count, severely low, unlikely. I felt my legs go weak for a second, and I had to steady myself against the porch railing. "No," I said again, but there was no conviction left in it now, just disbelief. "No, she told me she was late, but we didn't. She said we should wait before getting excited. She didn't even—" "She knew," Greg said quietly. The words sliced right through me. "She knew before today," he added. Of course she did. Of course. Everything started lining up now in the worst possible way. Her panic when I showed up, the note, Greg's urgency, Ethan being there today. They weren't just being reckless. They were running out of time. I let out a long, shaky breath, staring past Greg at nothing in particular. My mind was trying to process it, but it kept slipping, like I couldn't quite hold on to the full weight of it all at once. She was going to let me believe it was mine, I said. It wasn't a question. Greg didn't answer. He didn't have to. That silence said more than anything else could. I nodded slowly,
more to myself than to him. "Yeah," I muttered. "Yeah, that tracks." My chest felt tight, but not in the same explosive way as before. This was different, quieter, colder, more final. I pushed off the railing and stood up straight again. "So that's it," I said. "That's the whole picture." Greg looked like he wanted to say something else, but he didn't. I turned toward my house. From here, it looked exactly the same as it always had. Same windows, same front door. But now it felt like I was looking at a place I'd never actually known. "You gonna be all right?" Greg asked behind me. I paused for a second. Then I shook my head slightly. "No," I said honestly. "Probably not." And then I started walking back across the lawn, toward the house where my wife was waiting. Except now, I knew she wasn't just my wife anymore. And whatever was about to happen next, there was no version of it that ended with things going back to normal.